This is the Digital Savage Experience Podcast, hosted by Roman Prokopchuk, bringing you all things digital marketing, tech, business, and motivation. What's stopping you from becoming relentless in all aspects of life? Are you ready to become a digital savage? Let's get into today's episode.
Hey everyone, this is Roman Prokopchuk, and this is the Digital Savage Experience Podcast. Today I have with me Ido Singer. Ido is the assistant women's basketball coach at UNCG and the host of the One Last Thought podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Roman. I appreciate it.
Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I grew up in Israel, played basketball ever since I could pretty much walk and identify what a basketball is. And started going up through the ranks over there until I played on the professional level around the age of 17. Did that for a few years, enjoyed it, had some great experiences, but then fell out of love with the game. Ended up moving to the United States to pursue my academic career. And then a few years later, I felt like something was missing. And so I started coaching, and that kind of in a roundabout way got me to Division I coaching where I am right now. Started at the lower levels, working with anyone from middle school through high school, through Division III basketball, and all the way to Division I. And here I am at UNCG. I love it here in North Carolina. It's a great opportunity for me and my family. And every day that I do what I love is such a blessing.
That's awesome. I also saw you do like skills clinics also.
Yeah, I used to do that too. I still do them, but not with the same frequency. I used to do that more as a side business that I had, running clinics for different levels of players and running them throughout the summers. I do that still, not as much as I used to, but I still enjoy that. I love teaching. This is why I'm in this profession. At the end of the day, we're lucky enough to go to work basically wearing pajamas. So it's all about teaching for me, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to do that every day.
That's awesome. And I know it's kind of a general question, but what do you think kind of makes a good coach in terms of qualities, or what resonates with, players or anybody else in kind of a leadership position?
I think it's being able to come from the standpoint of, this is not about me, the coach, it's about them, the players. The most important commodity that we have here. I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for the players that I'm coaching today. So trying to be interested in their lives, in their academics, of course, and then in what they do on the court is my top priority. Try and ask questions and help them in any way, shape, or form. When coaches become more internal in the sense that what is in it for me, I feel that takes away from what coaching really is.
Yeah, and making it about the team and the players and impacting them and having them become, productive members of, society, because not obviously all of them are going to go to the next level or pursue, the sport that they're in, moving forward. They're going to do something that's completely different in most cases, but carry those skills and what they learned, throughout life.
That's right. Yeah, I'm trying to prepare them for life.
So what motivates you to succeed?
Well, outside of my family, which is the most important thing for me in the world, I'm so grateful for my wife, my 3 kids, my dog, such amazing creatures in my life, and they motivate me every day. That to me is a given, but I think the biggest thing for me, and it took me about 40 years to find my why. I started thinking about that ever since I read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. And I looked at other people's answers, and it was a big buzz at the time, and everybody was posting why it is they're doing what they're doing. And I was looking on Twitter, and I'm like, oh, I like that. I like this. Maybe that's my why. Maybe this is my why. It didn't work. It has to be something that you work through and figure out, and it has to be completely unique to you. And so it took me a long time to figure out what is my why and what motivates me. And I found that my biggest motivator is to create things. I love creating different things, whether it's in basketball, helping players become better, creating better players, or whether through our conversations of creating better people or better habits. The different things that I do here in my position at UNCG, creating different processes to analyze the data that we have and how can we gain an advantage, or through the podcast that I run, creating conversations between people that never took place and sending those out to the world. I think I'm at my best when I create, and I think I am at my highest level of energy when I create. So that to me is my biggest why, and that's my motivation.
That's awesome. I think, being a creator, whether it's content or some kind of medium or video, or, creating, like you said, in terms of like the role or the profession you're in, I think it adds a level of kind of differentiation and takes away from the monotony. So if you have a job that's just, kind of cookie cutter, if you will, which obviously people have to pay the bills, but if you're passionate about what you're doing and you're constantly redefining, learning, and kind of growing, then you're never going to be kind of complacent in your role, and you're always going to be creating or trying something different, and in like revolutionizing or becoming who you are, you're technically kind of recreating yourself as well.
I couldn't agree more. I had a guest on my podcast a while back, and she was talking about how everything we see around us was created by a vision of someone before us. The things that we are using right now to communicate were created by people just like you and I, who had a vision and made something out of nothing. I think creating is such a driving force for humanity. It's what is propelling us forward. And I am so motivated by it every day, and I love talking about it. I think it's such a cool thing to be involved with.
Yeah, I agree. So what's one thing that you've seen as a weakness in yourself in the past that you've turned around and utilized as a strength today?
I think growing up, I was very, very impatient, and I think I have a lot of those moments still today. I'm still a work in progress. I turned 40 in August of last year, and I'm entering the second half of my life still being a work in progress, and I'm proud of it. I think we all are to a certain extent. But I was very, very impatient growing up, and I think I'm doing a better job of that right now. I understand that so much of this life is playing the long game. Things don't happen when we want them to happen all the time. Understanding that sometimes you have to put in years of work to get to what you want to get is a necessity. And so I don't get as upset about things not happening as quickly as I want them to, as I have been in the past. Understanding that success is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's something that, that's a Gary Vee quote, I believe, and love listening to his stuff, because he as well is talking about how, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you can't take shortcuts, and you have to be patient with your process. And so that's what I'm trying to do every day. I'm trying to be more intentional about what I do, more patient with my expectation of results, and understanding that there's going to be bumps along the way that are going to try and derail me from where I'm going. And if I'm acting to those with impatience rather than observing them and trying to figure out how I can go through them, then I'm doing myself and everyone else a disservice. So I'm trying to be more and more patient, and I think I've done a better job at that. So that used to be a huge weakness of mine that is on the verge of turning into strength.
Yeah, I agree. And I think kind of your destination in life isn't a, fixed position. It's a moving target. So you get somewhere, ideally, hopefully you refine your goal or make your goal greater, or you pivot in terms of what your interests are or what you want to achieve. And it's constantly refining and, like you said, rebuilding yourself. And you don't become who you're supposed to be by, I'm the best one at age 35 and let me stop, growing as a person. You're constantly being redefined by what you're learning, but, what you're accepting, what you're doing, and then the experiences you're having. So, traumatic experiences, positive experiences kind of all shape your worldview and who you become, and you constantly keep changing because who you were, even today may be different than who you were last week.
You got to constantly change and you got to constantly evolve. And like you said, life is going to throw all kinds of curveballs in our way. And if we get deterred because we were expecting a certain outcome and it's not what we expected, guess what? We have no control over what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. So living your life in constant reaction mode other than readjustment mode is exhausting. So we have to keep readjusting, being patient through the process, and having faith in what we're doing and in the fact that it's going to bear fruit. It's going to help us in the long run. We can't be too reactionary.
Yeah, and I think staying in your lane also. So you're running your own race. So oftentimes you compare yourselves to friends, family, people you may have had some kind of contact or relationship in the past. Maybe they're more successful than you, and maybe they've gotten to where they are now a lot easier in terms of, the process they had to go through. But at the end of the day, it's you versus you, I like to say. And the only person kind of responsible for where you're going to get is you. Nobody's going to give you anything. Maybe you're going to get lucky, the stars align, and basically you meet someone and you start up a conversation and you connect, and that opens doors, which does happen. And, it's happened in terms of having guests on the podcast, in terms of networking and growing, your community, but ultimately you're dependent your own success in terms of what you can do and how you can refine and redefine yourself.
I love that. Embrace your pace. That's it.
Yeah, and what you give out. So I think maybe 10 years ago, I turned 35 this year. So 10 years ago, maybe at 25, I was chasing more, title, success, money, but then refining it as you get older, like you said, and, I mentioned, you start changing as well. Your priorities change, your circle changes, maybe becomes smaller. And basically the things that are important to you, change over time as well. So it's oftentimes, defined and redefined over time. So I think that's important as well.
I couldn't agree more. I found my friend sent me a message, a screenshot of a letter that I wrote to him. He's my best friend back home. He sent me a screenshot of a letter that I wrote to him when I was 23 years old and I left Israel to move to the United States. And I was reading that letter and I was mortified. I did not recognize the person who wrote that letter. And to your point, we are ever evolving because there's probably something wrong because we're either not challenged to grow or we are, I don't know, on an island somewhere. So it's an ever evolving process, and you have to embrace it and you have to just enjoy it and see where life takes you.
Yeah, I think it's an on and off switch also, because some people get comfortable in life and complacent, and that's kind of the death of innovation. You're comfortable, this job has a pension, or, I want to get tenure and I can never get fired, so I don't really have to do more work. Or a lot of the times there's a stigma about, the government roles in the United States and other countries where you kind of work for the government and you do as little work as possible because you're not going to get fired, and there's no incentive to grow. If you do better, you're not necessarily going to get promoted or some kind of tangible, recognition of, your deeds. So you don't really strive to do more. But when that light kind of or switch turns in your head, that you can learn. And in 2020, everything is kind of open source. You can learn anything online. I remember when the internet was in its infancy, when I was younger, when it was still dial-up, and even before, when it was expensive and I didn't have the internet. So you have to go to a library, look at an encyclopedia, but you have all this knowledge. So you really don't have anyone to blame for your own success or where you get in 2020 with all the technological advancements, I think.
You have to ask yourself, are you internally motivated or externally motivated? If you're externally motivated, then a job with tenure or a job that doesn't give you bonuses for great production is not going to be a job that pushes you to get better. If you're internally motivated, like you said, you have the resources to learn, to grow, to get better, to challenge yourself, to challenge others. And so I think that is something that as you get older, like you alluded to, you kind of develop into. You're more internally motivated when you find what it is that you want to do and your why and your motivation and your purpose. So moving from externally motivated to internally motivated, I think is, again, to your point, I think it's a big, important move.
Yeah, and I think as you get older, I think a lot of people switch to leaving a legacy. So, giving as much back as possible, whether it's with time, with money, giving information, helping as many people as possible. And then that naturally kind of leads to more success also, because people see who you are. With, advancements in different digital platforms and new social media platforms popping up, people just use social media as vanity or highlighting their life. I mean, you can basically build a resume, show who you are, your skill set, what you do, and show the world who you are, and oftentimes reach people across the world and then get opportunities that way. So I think using technology, using social media, and connecting with the world in a genuine way really can propel you personally and professionally as well.
I couldn't agree more. And on the point of legacy, that would be my biggest advice to anybody listening, is to be consumed with your legacy. You have to come from the point of everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm putting out there into the world is going to go down in history as my legacy, whether it's positive, negative, sloppy, or to the point. I think when maybe a few years back, I don't know, maybe even 10 years back, I went back online and I took down every picture of me holding a beer. And it's silly. It's a beer. I've never been a heavy drinker, although maybe some of my friends from the bartending days would disagree a little bit, but I was never a sloppy drinker or anything like that. But as I got older, my legacy is not about who I was in the 20s. It's in my 20s. It's who I am right now, and the family man that I am, the professional who works with young people and tries to motivate and inspire and help. And then the person who creates content for other people to consume and hopefully grow from. Those pictures of me holding a beer are not going to do anything to move the needle towards where I want my legacy to be. And so anything that's counterintuitive to that can go away. So I'm consumed with my legacy. I'm trying to do the things that I do to leave something behind that's greater than anything I could accomplish myself. And so that is my biggest thing that I, want to leave people with, is just be consumed with your legacy. Just always move forward thinking, what is it that I'm leaving behind? And if it's not worth leaving behind, leave it behind you.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the whole taking down pictures. There's been things that people have said on social media, or like you said, images that have haunted people, even though they're not the same people. They said things stupidly, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and clearly you're not the same person you were, in your 20s or in your 30s or even in your teens. But people always look for something to kind of, contradict you, even if you're in a role. Or there's also maybe going to be people that are spiteful, that are envious of where you are and try to sabotage you. And you're basically giving ammo in that sense. So I think in 2020, it's important to kind of defend your brand online, really show who you are through social media and other, platforms. If there's something, like you said, that may not align with who you are now, I would recommend, like you did, take it down, or have some kind of, PR response that if somebody finds it, or, something happens and it goes into the limelight, explaining it or having some kind of exit strategy for that. Because I think actually Kevin Hart, I don't know, it was in 2012 or maybe 2010, one tweet basically lost him hosting the Oscars, but it was just one of those stupid comments he didn't really mean, and he doesn't have those kind of viewpoints, but he just said it, and it's on social media, and now it lives forever. So
we're not living in a world that we can allow ourselves to be surprised when something like this happens. The world we live in, everything you put out there can be screenshot, and it's there forever, and you no longer control the message. So if you put it out there, fine. If you can take it down, better.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even though some people don't want to be role models, they're kind of thrown into that role. And even what you're doing or the kind of content you're putting out there. I mean, I had somebody reach out, I believe a year ago, that's been following me for the last 10 years that I went to high school with. And, you're putting out great content, you're knowledgeable, you seem like you're working with all these, cool companies. And I didn't even hear from this person for a decade. And he's been kind of quietly, watching me in terms of what I've been putting out. So it's really important to align what you're putting out and really show an authentic and genuine, portrayal of yourself. I mean, there's a lot of people on social that basically put out content for who they want to be. So in a way, I mean, I'm not going to, knock what people are trying to build, kind of, I guess, maybe fake it till you make it. But a lot of people see through that, and just being authentic and focusing on your strengths rather than, I don't have this, but let me make believe, or let me be a generalist about this information and put it out. Hopefully some people believe me that I'm an expert. So,
2020 people see through that like it's clear water.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's kind of like a two-way street. So with social media and with technology, people you've, made friendships with or connections with in the past, you can stay in touch, with technology in terms of having a Skype call or jumping on, a Zoom conference or just a call, and keeping that kind of relationship alive and trying to add as much value as you can. So there's a lot of people on platforms like LinkedIn that you'll get a friend request or a connection, and then literally you hit connect and you get an automated message. Hey, I'm so glad you connected, but do you want to buy XYZ? So there's things like that, but using social media to stay in touch and follow each other, and then vice versa. If you meet somebody online, I would encourage, if your paths align or you can add value to each other, take that conversation and that kind of friendship offline and see what you guys can offer each other or with each other's networks or communities, and kind of build a tribe of people that keep each other accountable and are looking in terms of the goals they set moving forward in kind of the same direction.
Just like you and I did.
Yeah, I mean, technology is powerful, and you have to want to do it. You know what I mean? People hire other agencies to look for guests and do other things, but you really have to put in kind of the manpower and really grind to get to what you want to do.
You're playing the long game. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortcuts, I don't think, in life. There's no kind of get rich quick scheme, other than if you're like 1 in 100 million and it's some kind of fluke like the lottery, or you have some kind of relative that you don't know about that leaves you like $100 million. Everything else you have to kind of grind. So I really appreciate you coming on today. Can you let the audience know how they can find you?
Sure. So you can find me on social media at One Last Thought Pod, or if you Google One Last Thought Podcast, you'll be able to find everything about the podcast or everything on social media. You can find me on onelasthoughtpod@gmail.com. If you are interested in sharing a thought on the podcast, please reach out to me. Let me know and we'll connect. I'm looking forward to hearing from, anybody who wants to share anything. It's just about collecting your best advice for future generations and then sharing it through the platform. So yeah, reach out to me on any social media.
Awesome. Thanks again for stopping by.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This podcast has been brought to you by Nova Zora Digital. Find out how Nova Zora Digital can help your company grow online. Learn more at novazoradigital.com. Until next time, all you digital savages.